Welcome to Bible study. We are preparing this study for October 19th in 2025 at St. Michael's Lutheran Church. We are going to just spend one more week on the letter of James, but really also be informed in this by our study of wisdom literature in the spring of this last year. You'll notice that I'm standing in a particular place here at St. Michael's. I'm right in front of this piece of art by Ernst Schwenner, which adorns the front of our church. And particularly, I'm standing in front of this placard with these words on it. This is the old motto of Concordia in Portland, Christi crux est mihi lux. The cross of Christ is my light. That is kind of a wisdom saying of a sort. And I want you to think about what that is actually suggesting to us, is that I walk, I move, I conduct my life in the light of the cross of Christ. James was writing to an early Christian community. Actually, these are more likely his sermons. He was preaching to an early Christian community. They had heard Jesus is coming back, and they had heard him say, soon. Many of them were anticipating that to be happening any moment. We know now 2,000 years have passed. That soon in God's mind is a different soon than maybe in our mind. But they were asking this question of, now what? How do we walk? How do we live in these days that remain to us before the coming of our Lord? It is a perennial question, and it is a question which we continue to ask, whether we are in a state that we think the Lord is returning momentarily, or whether we are in a simple recognition of the fact that all of us will meet Jesus upon our death. How do we live? How do we conduct ourselves in these intervening years, days, months, that are given to us right now? Christ has said very clearly that our lives matter, that what we say and what we do are important. They're important because Jesus lived them. Jesus had friends, Jesus had family, Jesus had a job. Jesus ate and drank. He went to funerals. He helped people. And in that simple life of a child, of a youth and an adult, in dying, Jesus rendered important our lives. That his fleshliness is a statement of the importance of the living of our life. James is very clearly speaking to the very practical, everyday sorts of things that go into the living of life. As he spoke to how we speak to one another, that we don't just simply have a faith in our hearts, but that it is a faith which lives in a generosity toward those who are in need. As he says, what good is it if we don't have, or if we say to someone who is hungry or who doesn't have enough to wear, oh, be well fed and stay warm, God bless you, but we don't actually give them a coat, or we don't actually hand them something to eat, and we don't care for their physical needs. He says, what good is that? That is not a faith that lives. That faith is dead. That our faith and our relationship with God takes substantial form in the way that we live. I think it is incumbent upon every generation of Christian to ask these questions of, what does my Christianity look like in this place and in this time? What is Christian? What does it mean to be that? I remember when I was in Utah, that was actually a much larger question. because, of course, we were a tiny minority in a state that was dominated by the LDS. And Christians were oftentimes asking this question. It was very interesting because the LDS were quite clear about what made one LDS. There were certain garments to wear, there were food restrictions, there were dietary restrictions, there were things you could and could not do. And they marked out that LDS community. Not all LDS abided by it all the time, but generally that was true. What made us Christians? How were we? We had no distinctive dress. We had no particular food prohibitions or dietary restrictions. We had what? What marked us as Christian? James speaks to an ethos, to a life lived that was in many respects at odds with the Roman society in which they found themselves. His words on brotherhood, on care for the weak and the vulnerable, especially his words about not recognizing status, wealth and rank in society, would have really put that early Christian community in a contrast with the larger Roman world, which was very stratified, which saw all kinds of reasons to see that this person is different than that person is different than another. And that those restrictions, those stratifications of society were rigidly enforced. You had to be, if you were a poor person, you dare not mingle with the wealthy. And by and large also, if you were wealthy, you were socially constricted from having those conversations with a poor man, unless business or some other need required you to talk to them. But you just never socialized. And here James talks about coming to church, and that rich person and poor person walks into a community which was egalitarian, which had no distinctiveness in it. We saw that in chapter 2. What about our communion? What about our society as a church sets us apart from the world around us? I think that is an increasingly important question to ask. When I was a child, everybody in that little town I grew up in was probably Christian or had been raised in a Christian home. And they all were, by and large, living that ethos. Some of them better than others, it's true. I don't think that's true anymore. I think there are a fair number of people in the societies in which we live today who are operating their lives by a different principle than a Christian principle. That are governed by other ideas and rules that govern the way they interact with their fellow human beings, the way they make spending decisions, the way they raise their families, and the way they talk. What is it that we say at St. Michael's that we say, this is who we are? And if you're going to behave or if you're going to do these other things, that belongs somewhere else. James gives us a few really useful things, I think, that are maybe things we ought to consider. I want to start at the end of the book and work forward just a little bit. He says, if anyone among you wanders from the truth and someone brings him back, let him know that whoever brings back a sinner from his wandering will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins. I think one of the things James says is that we value one another and we are committed to each other, and that we aren't simply willing to say this is a voluntary association of like-minded people, and if you're no longer like-minded and you want to go off and wander away and do something else or be something else, that's just fine by us. James speaks of a communion of people who pursue. Not that we would entrap or force someone to stay, but we're not simply going to let them walk away without saying, hey, what's going on? What's happened? Can I help you? Talk to me. Don't just be silent. Don't just disappear. We are together, one body. We can't just let that slide away. If any one of you is suffering, the prior paragraph, let him pray. Is anyone cheerful? Let him praise. Is anyone among you sick? Let him call for the elders of the church and let them pray over him and anoint him with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer of the faith will save the one who is sick. Christianity is a community of people who recognizes our contingency upon God, who recognizes that we depend on him, and who does that in hope, and who cheerfully can step forward into this life, praising God, even when times are hard, because God hears us and answers prayers. I don't know exactly how God will answer every prayer. I don't need to, because I trust him. Because he is listening, and I know and trust he loves me. These are just a couple of ways that the cross of Christ lights our way, that it is light to us. As you read through or skim through this book again, in preparation for Sunday or just for yourself, ask yourself what this means for your life, what this means for the way we organize ourselves, the way we solve our problems as a community, the way we deal with one another and each other's needs, each other's success, each other's joys, each other's failures. God bless you. We will see you Sunday.